various shelters for people who have been abused. And let's talk about that, because I think quite recently there was an article in the newspaper indicating that some of these shelters are having some very, very difficult times in terms of support. Yes. And I want to talk about the kind of support that both of you receive in terms of financial support to do what you have to do. And let's talk about that. Let's talk about the shelters and some of the ways that have been proposed to finance and yes, the shortcomings that you see there.
Well, first I'd like to say that both the YWCA Shelter for Women and Children and Peace are supported by the United Way, and we're very grateful to United Way. I think there's a misconception in the community that United Way, if they contribute to an organization, then they pick up the entire bill, and they clearly don't. It's just a fraction, it's a percentage of the entire budget, and so it's up to we who are in the agencies to raise those additional funds. Social services are all needing a lot of support, and financial raising money out in the community is a very competitive thing these days. Of course, there's foundation support, and there's local contributors and corporate sponsors, but all of those entities are really being pursued so much these days with the competition for dollars. It's very difficult.
What do you find in education in terms of the kind of support that you receive in grants and whatnot, Ms. Butler, for what you're doing?
Okay, for what we're doing, support is limited, and you know, there are some state contracts that we can do. There are a few grants, a few federal grants that we have that we can work with, but of course we are a nonprofit organization, and there's always a need for monies. You know, people's salary has to be paid, there are certain things that has to be done for children, that type of thing. And so it's a constant battle, you know, to find funds to where we need. There has been some organization that has come to our aid, you know, for different type of small projects, and we work with small children also. Like we start with age 2 in a therapeutic preschool environment. So there are some people who say, well, they're friends of children, so they'll give some special grants for special projects, and I think we make it that way. And
so you're trying to find as much money as you possibly can, but there's always, what about individuals, volunteers? Let's talk about that, because I think that both of you would depend quite heavily upon persons who are unpaid. Let's talk about that.
We do have volunteers who work with us in the court at the domestic violence docket, but the particular kind of work we do with the men requires so much training that we really can't rely on volunteers to do the therapeutic and counseling and education work with the men, but we do have volunteers, of course, that work on our board and help us raise money and that sort of thing, and who do work with us as court advocates on the domestic violence docket.
So not only do you work with the overwhelming majority of the females who are abused, but you also work with some kind of counseling program dealing with the abusers.
That's right. We have 230 men in our program right now who come every week for 2 hours of counseling and education. Most of them are court ordered, but men can also come to us on a volunteer basis. And then we have a staff person that works with the women, basically to make sure that the women know the services available for them through the YWCA shelter and domestic violence program. That program has support groups for women who have been battered. We have one staff person who works over the phone with the women, primarily to get them linked up with other resources in the community.
And so you've got at present in your program alone at least 250 men. Many of them have been ordered by the court to be a part of those programs. Now, what is that representative of the number of men that are involved in these various programs, not only in your center but throughout, you know, having had that kind of contact with other centers?
Domestic violence is the most underreported crime in America, so I think it's just the tip of the iceberg. I know the police department says that they're dispatched 650 times each month to homes where there is a plea for help for domestic violence. So I don't think that we have a true reading just by virtue of what the criminal justice system is reporting of what the extent of the problem is. The National Coalition Against Domestic Violence reports 6 million women being beaten each year and 4,000 of them dying. Last year in 1992 in Davidson County, 22 women were the victims of domestic violence, assault and homicide.
And so, it's a real problem, and it's a problem that brings us to this next issue, and that is child abuse and domestic violence and the law. What does the law say about the abuse of children, sexually abused of children, and what does the law say about domestic violence, and how has the law changed over the last few years, and what do you, the two of you, believe the law ought to say in order to make what you do, make you better at what you do? Let's start with you, Ms.
For
Butler.
child sexual abuse, the law has been strengthened a lot over the past few years. Domestic violence is where child sexual abuse used to be a few years ago, where it was really underreported and the law not really looking at it that well because it was a child and the child doesn't make a good witness and all that type of thing. And some of that's still true, but the law, there's more teeth in the law now for men who commit offenses against children. They're not walking away from it anymore. There's a lot of probation used, but it's definitely against the law to sexually abuse a child now. And sexual abuse comes in it's a lot of ways to sexually abuse a child. It doesn't always have to be penetration. There are other ways too. And
now, what are some of those other ways, Ms. Butler?
Well, exposing yourself to a child, touching that child's genitals. There's a lot of inappropriate sexual behavior. All those type of things are, you know, anytime you violate someone's personal rights and personal space, that's now against the law to do that. And depending on that child's age, you know, you know that it's wrong to do it. So just a lot of things like that.
And so the law speaks more to that as an issue now.
The law speaks more to that as an issue now. The law also allows people to report it without being suspect or without being saying they're violating somebody's confidentiality. Teachers, therapists, and whoever, they really have a mandate to report now. If you suspect child sexual abuse, you just suspect it, go ahead and report it and get it investigated to see if there's a problem there. You know, usually doctors, you know, wouldn't report it because they feel there was some kind of doctor-client privilege. Well, you no longer have that privilege anymore. It's a mandate.
So the law
says it's a misdemeanor to say if you don't report, it's a misdemeanor.
So
now.
the law says that that has to be reported
Says
now,
it has
and those
to be
persons
reported.
who are aware of what is going on in that area and who are not reporting that are in violation in reality of the law.
Yes, they are.
What about domestic violence in the law?
Three things that I can think of. I believe it was July of 1991, for the first time in the state of Tennessee, it became illegal to rape one's wife. And that's a pretty major step, I think, in the right direction. And another thing happened in 1992 in July, and that was the new stalking bill, which was making it a felony offense to stalk someone. And usually those are intimate or previous intimate relationships where there's an obsession and then stalking occurs and can result in homicide or just can result in that very scary behavior of stalking. So those are two new laws on the books. The other thing is that for many years it's been illegal to assault another person and to bring bodily harm to them. Now those laws are being upheld with respect to domestic violence. It used to be that in the courts the judges would say, kiss, make up, go home, forget this, we're dropping the charges. And now things are really changing, and especially beginning in March of this year, two General Sessions judges, Judges Penny Harrington and Gail Robinson Jr., have taken over the domestic violence dockets and are hearing all the cases and providing a great deal much more consistency, and I think are making it a very much potentially safer place for victims in Davidson County, taking this problem once again very much more seriously than it has been.
What impact has this had on the law enforcement authorities? I mean, on the police, for example.
I think they're feeling a lot more supported out in the community, knowing that in that domino relationship of the criminal justice system, that something in the court system is going to be done when they're out in the field doing their work, taking out those warrants, trying to facilitate the law. They know that they're going to get the backup in the court.
Very good. And we've got about 3 or 4 minutes. It gives both of you an opportunity to make some final comments in terms of what we've been talking about, or perhaps some additional information that we didn't have an opportunity to get across today. Let's start with you, Ms. Butler, and get from you some final comments.
Okay, for a final comment, I would just like to say for us all to be involved in the problems that we have in this society, especially dealing with our children. Children have a lot of need. They need to be supported. They need to be believed, and they look to adults. Who else can they look to for guidance? And so, whether it's a parent, whether it's a teacher, a relative, let's not look the other way. Let's get involved. Let's try to support our children, protect our children.